Let's go ahead and begin by wrapping our lead wire around the hook shank 12 to 14 times and clipping off the excess wire. And go ahead and push that wire into the back of the bead. Now apply some additional wraps so the wire is at the 50% point of the hook shank. Go ahead and cut off the excess wire and using a pair of scissors, angle the wire around the hook shank. Adding lead wire to this fly will do three things. One, it'll help set the cone against the eye of the hook. Two, it'll help create a segmented body. And three, help create additional weight to the fly. Let's go ahead and attach our thread just behind the lead wire and cut off our excess thread and advance our thread forward, covering up the majority of the wire and creating a thread dam just behind the wire. Now advance your thread back towards the bend of the hook with your thread hanging in line with the barb of the hook. To begin creating the tail of the fly, we're going to take one piece of tan marabou and measure it against the hook shank so it's slightly longer than half a shank length long. Now go ahead and attach the marabou just above the barb of the hook with secure thread wraps and advance your thread forward, binding the marabou on top of the hook shank as you wrap. Now cut off the butt ends of the marabou in line with the 50% point of the hook shank and advance your thread back towards the base of the tail. Now go ahead and grasp one piece of brown marabou and make sure it's the same length as the tan marabou below it and attach it on top of the tan marabou with secure thread wraps. Now begin to wrap your thread forward, securing the marabou to the 50% point of the hook shank, cutting off the butt ends of the marabou, then advancing your thread back to the base of the tail. Go ahead and grab another piece of tan marabou, make sure it's an appropriate length as the rest of the tails, and attach it on top of the brown marabou with secure thread wraps. Now advance your thread forward to the 60% point of the hook shank. And cut off the excess marabou in front of the tie down point. Now advance your thread back to the base of the tail and then forward, making sure that the marabou is secured tightly to the hook shank. Now go ahead and prepare 3 long pieces of root beer crystal flash and place the crystal flash on the near side of the hook shank and attach it at the 60% point with secure thread wraps. Now go ahead and grasp the root beer crystal flash that is in front of the tie down point and wrap it around the hook shank once and then align it on the far side of the hook shank. Now secure the flash on the near and far side of the hook shank with secure thread wraps. With your material hand, go ahead and grasp the flash and pull it beyond the tail and make sure that the flash is on the near and far side of the hook shank and begin to wrap your thread back towards the base of the tail. Go ahead and advance your thread forward with the thread hanging just in front of the butt ends of the marabou, and with a pair of scissors, go ahead and cut the flash so it's slightly longer than the tail. Now go ahead and prepare a 4-inch piece of brown wire and attach it to the near side of the hook shank. Now advance your thread back towards the base of the tail, ensuring that the wire stays on the near side of the hook shank as you wrap. To create the body of this fly, go ahead and apply some sand SLF prism dubbing to your thread. Now begin to create a smooth body by wrapping the dubbing around the thread beginning at the tail and ending just behind the bead. Now select an appropriate sized dark bar ginger hackle feather. When wrapped around the hook, we want the barbules of the feather to be in line with the point of the hook or slightly longer. Go ahead and peel off the webby fibers from the base of the feather, exposing the quill, and place it against the hook shank and attach it, making sure that the inside of the feather is facing the fly. Go ahead and cut off the excess quill as close as you can to the tie down point. Now begin to wrap the hackle around the hook shank towards the bend of the hook with equally spaced wraps. With the feather laying across the near side of the hook shank near the base of the tail, go ahead and grab your wire. While holding the tip of the hackle, begin to wrap your wire around the hook shank, securing the quill to the hook shank. Continue wrapping your wire forward, creating an equally segmented body, with your wire ending just in front of the bead. Go ahead and secure the wire to the near side of the hook shank and break off the wire cleanly at the tie down point. And break off the tip of the hackle that is extending past the bend of the hook. To create the collar of this fly, go ahead and grab a tan pine squirrel strip and hold it up vertically. Using a potato chip clip, go ahead and open up the clip and insert the hairs in between the clips, making sure that you're not binding down the hide. And now with the pair of scissors, go ahead and cut off the hide of the pine squirrel strip. Now go ahead and create a dubbing loop that is about 6 inches long. Now go ahead and place a dubbing loop tool at the end of the dubbing loop. While holding the dubbing loop open with your material hand, go ahead and place the potato chip clip with the squirrel hair and place each side of the thread onto each side of the squirrel hair and open up the clip to release the hair. At this point, it's very important to keep consistent thread tension on the dubbing loop. If you were to release tension, those hairs would fall out between the two pieces of thread. Now very lightly push the butt ends of the squirrel hair as close as you can to the 2 points of thread within the dubbing loop. While holding the dubbing loop tightly just below the hairs, go ahead and begin to spin the dubbing loop tool. As you release tension from the dubbing loop just below the hair will begin to spin. Now continue to spin the dubbing tool and run your fingers up and down the squirrel hairs to ensure that any loose hairs come off. And begin to wrap it around the hook shank, making sure to palmer the hair back towards the bend of the hook as you wrap forward. Now continue to palmer the squirrel hair firmly against the back of the cone and go ahead and tie off the dubbing loop with 3 to 4 secure thread wraps. With a pair of scissors, go ahead and cut the thread of the dubbing loop as close as you can to the base of the cone. To ensure that the squirrel hair collar stays flush against the cone, it's important that each thread wrap lays on top of one another. I like to guide the thread against the edge of the cone as I wrap. To finish this fly, go ahead and use your whip finish tool and make sure that each wrap of thread with the whip finish tool is run against the edge of the cone. This again will help ensure that the squirrel collar stays flush against the cone. And clip off the excess thread. And that's how you tie the baby brown.